I keep my bread fresh for 3 weeks, not 3 days, 3 weeks. And it's an old trick. The bakeries would rather you never learned. Last Tuesday, my neighbor Carol carried half a loaf out to her garbage can. Bought Thursday, hard as a shingle by Monday, gone by Tuesday morning. She does that most weeks and she doesn't think twice about it because that's just what bread does. That's what we've all been told bread does. The average American household throws out somewhere close to $100 of bread a year, and every crumb of that waste is built into the price of the loaf before it ever reaches your cart. I have not thrown a loaf of bread in the trash since 1981. Not one. I learned it standing at my grandmother Betty's elbow in her kitchen in the fall of 1974. And it cost her nothing then, and it costs me nothing now. No gadget, no special container, no $30 bread keeper from the kitchen store, a roll of waxed paper, and about 30 seconds of your time on the day the loaf comes home. That's the whole investment. Now here's the part that might bother some people. The reason most of you don't already know this isn't because it doesn't work. It's because a loaf that goes hard on day 4 is a customer who comes back on day 5. Nobody at the bakery counter is going to lean over and tell you how to make one loaf last most of a month. There's no money in it for them, and I'll show you in a few minutes that the industry uses this exact method themselves every single day on the bread they sell you as fresh baked. I'll show you why the refrigerator is the worst place in your kitchen for a loaf of bread, and why nearly everyone puts it there anyway. I'll tell you about the trick with a cup of water that brings a 3-week-old loaf back so close to the bakery that guests have asked me where I bought it. And I want to be straight with you from the start. There are a couple of breads this doesn't do perfectly, and there's one situation where you should throw the loaf out and not argue with it. I'll tell you exactly where it falls short, because I'd rather you trust me than be impressed by me. So hit subscribe if you'd rather trust a kitchen than a label. Here is how I keep my bread fresh for 3 weeks. Most people think bread goes hard because it dries out, that the water leaves and the loaf turns to stone. That's the natural guess, and it's wrong, and getting it wrong is exactly why nothing you've tried has worked. Here's what's actually happening. Bread is mostly starch, and when that dough is baked, the heat swells all those starch molecules up loose and soft, like a basket of yarn dumped out on the floor. That looseness is what fresh feels like in your mouth. But starch does not want to stay loose. From the minute the loaf leaves the oven, those molecules start knitting themselves back into tight, hard, orderly little bundles, all by themselves. Slowly, hour by hour, the yarn winds itself back up into a ball. That's staling. The bakers have a word for it, retrogradation, but you don't need the word. You need the picture. The water is still in there. It's simply been squeezed out of the soft part and locked up where your tongue can't find it. A loaf that has gone hard on your counter weighs almost exactly what it weighed the day you bought it. Nothing left. It just went stiff. And now the part that matters, the part Betty knew, and the reason every bit of this works. That knitting happens fastest at cold temperatures just above freezing. Not room temperature, cold, which is to say the exact temperature of the inside of your refrigerator, right around 40 degrees. Bread on a refrigerator shelf goes stale several times faster than the same bread sitting out on your counter. You are not preserving it in there. You are running the clock forward. But drop that same loaf below freezing, and the whole process stops cold. The yarn cannot knit. The molecules do not have enough freedom to move, so whatever state that bread was in when it went in is the state it's in when it comes out. Freezing does not slow staling down a little. It stops it flat like a hand on a clock face. That one idea is worth more than every bread box, bag clip, and freshness gadget ever sold. You are not fighting a loaf that's drying out. You're fighting a loaf that's tightening up, and cold, real cold, holds it exactly where it is. Here's what you do. And the timing is the whole thing. So listen close. You freeze it the day it comes home, not day 3 when it starts feeling a little tired, not day 4 when you realize you're not going to get through it. The day it comes home, while it is still at its absolute best. Freezing preserves whatever you hand it. Hand it a fresh loaf, and 3 weeks later you get a fresh loaf back. Hand it a tired one, and you get a tired one back, faithfully preserved. Freshness is not something you restore later. It's something you save now. So the loaf comes in the door, and it goes straight to the counter, not the bread box. If it's unsliced, slice the whole thing right then with a serrated knife. Do not wait. Frozen bread does not slice, and you will not want to fight it at 7 in the morning. Now think about how you actually eat. 2 slices for toast, 4 for sandwiches. Whatever your household really goes through in one sitting, you are going to build the loaf into portions of that size, because the goal is to never take out more than you'll use. Tear off a sheet of waxed paper and lay a small square between every couple of slices as you stack the loaf back together. That little paper divider is what lets you pull 2 slices out of a frozen brick with your fingers instead of a chisel. Betty used the waxed paper that came in the cereal box, cut into squares with the kitchen shears, and kept them in a coffee tin by the sink. Cost her nothing at all. Then you wrap, and you wrap tight. Press the air out with the flat of your hand as you go. Air is the only real enemy in a freezer. What people call freezer burn is just moisture escaping the food and frosting up somewhere else, and it only happens where air can touch the bread. So the loaf gets one snug layer against the crumb, plastic wrap, or the bag it came in with the air pushed out, and then a second layer over the top of that, a freezer bag or foil, or another bread bag saved from last week. 2 layers. That's the difference between bread that tastes like bread in 3 weeks and bread that tastes like the inside of a freezer. Write the date on it with a pencil. Then hold back 3 or 4 days' worth on the counter for right now, and the rest goes in. 2 questions people always ask me, so let me answer them before you have to type them. Will it taste like the freezer? Only if it's wrapped in one thin layer or sitting open next to a bag of onions. 2 layers and it will not. I've done this every week for over 40 years. Will it come out soggy? No. Bread holds so little free water that it does not turn to mush the way a strawberry does. It comes out of the freezer firm, and it warms back up dry and clean. And notice what you did not buy. The kitchen store will happily sell you a bread keeper with a humidity vent for $30. There are bags advertised to add days to a loaf. I have used a roll of wax paper that cost about $2 and lasts me most of a year. The freezer was already running. You did not add 1 cent to that electric bill by putting a loaf inside it. And that's the kind of thing my grandmother knew that nobody ever bothered to write down. If you want the rest of them, I've gathered every trick, every recipe, every method into one place. Save $4,000 a year with Betty Sechrist's complete home saving method. Just scan the code on your screen right now, or tap the link down in the description and pinned right at the top of the comments. It's the same knowledge that kept families fed and warm when every penny counted, all in one spot. Go take a look. It's waiting for you. Now, freezing is only half of it. Anybody can put bread in a freezer. Bringing it back out right is what separates a loaf that tastes fresh from a loaf that tastes like it's been somewhere. For toast, this is almost embarrassing. You take the frozen slices out and you put them straight in the toaster. Frozen. Do not thaw them. Do not set them on the counter. Do not put them in the microwave first. Add a little time to the setting, and that slice comes out better than a slice off a 4-day-old loaf because the toaster does two jobs at once. It thaws and it unknits. That's the second half of the science, and it's the part almost nobody hears. Remember all that starch that wound itself into tight little bundles? Heat unwinds it again. Get bread up past about 140 degrees inside, and those bundles relax and let go, and the crumb turns soft again. That is not a trick of the mouth. That is the actual chemistry running backwards, which brings me to a whole loaf and the cup of water I promised you. Take your frozen loaf, still wrapped, and let it sit on the counter for an hour or so until it isn't a brick anymore. Heat your oven to 350 degrees. Now, fill an oven-safe mug or a small pan about halfway with water and set it on the rack right beside the loaf. Run the crust of that bread under the tap for one quick second just to dampen the outside and put it in bare, no foil, right on the rack. 10 to 12 minutes. That's it. What's happening in there is the water in the mug is turning into steam, and steam is what a real bakery oven is full of. That moisture keeps the crust from turning to leather while the heat drives into the middle and unwinds every bit of that starch. The loaf comes out with a crust that cracks under a knife and a middle that's soft and warm and smells the way your kitchen smelled when your mother was still doing the baking. My neighbor, Carol, the one with the garbage can, watched me do this on a Saturday with a loaf that had been in my freezer for 19 days. She stood in my kitchen and ate 2 pieces of it with butter and asked me which bakery it came from. It came from her own grocery store 3 weeks earlier, on sale. Now here's the honest part. A revived loaf is on a short clock. Warming it up unwinds that starch, but the minute it cools, it starts winding right back and faster than it did the first time. So a revived loaf is a supper loaf. Bake it, eat it that day, and don't expect it to sit pretty on the counter until Thursday, which is exactly why you portioned it in the first place. You bring back only what tonight's table needs, and everything else stays asleep in the freezer at full freshness. And that's the kind of thing my grandmother knew that nobody ever bothered to write down. If you want the rest of them, I've gathered every trick, every recipe, every method into one place. Save $4,000 a year with Betty Secret's complete home saving method. Just scan the code on your screen right now or tap the link down in the description and pinned right at the top of the comments. It's the same knowledge that kept families fed and warm when every penny counted, all in one spot. Go take a look. It's waiting for you. Now let's talk about the loaf you kept out and about the mistake almost every kitchen in this country makes with it. Most people do this backwards. They keep the bread in the refrigerator because cold sounds like it ought to preserve things, and they keep it on the counter only when they're going to finish it fast. That is precisely upside down. The counter is where bread should live for 3 or 4 days. The freezer is where it should live after that. The refrigerator is the one place in your kitchen that is actively working against you, and I'd rather you knew that plainly. There is exactly one exception, and I won't hide it from you. If you're in the Deep South in August with the windows open and the humidity sitting heavy for days, mold will take a soft loaf in 2 or 3 days on a counter. In that case, the refrigerator buys you time against the mold at the direct cost of the texture. But the better answer is still the freezer, and it's not close. For the counter loaf, the container depends on the bread. Soft sandwich bread stays in its plastic bag with the end twisted under because plastic holds moisture in, and that's what a soft loaf needs. A crusty bakery loaf, the kind with a real crackling crust, must never go in plastic. That crust goes soft and damp and disappointing within hours. That one goes in paper or wrapped in a clean linen towel, cut side, laid flat down on the board so the open crumb is sealed against the wood and the crust does the protecting. And that is what a bread box was actually for. Every kitchen built before 1950 had one. A tin or a wooden drawer with a couple of small vents in the back, and it was not decoration. It held just enough humidity to keep the crust from turning to leather and vented just enough air to keep the loaf from sweating and molding. Betty had a cream-colored tin one with a roll-front lid, and there was a loaf in it every single day of her life. Those boxes vanished from American kitchens in about one generation, and here's why. Bread itself changed. Somewhere in the middle of the last century, commercial bakeries began adding enzymes and softening agents into the dough, ingredients whose entire purpose is to slow that starch from knitting back up so the loaf stays squeezably soft on a shelf for a week and a half. Read the side of a supermarket loaf sometime and look for the mono and diglycerides. They did not teach anybody how to store bread. They sold the storage back to you, baked right into the price. And now the part I promised you about the bakery counter. Walk into most any supermarket in America, into that warm corner where the fresh baked smell is coming from, and understand what's really happening back there. A great deal of that bread arrives at the store already mixed, already shaped, already partly baked, and frozen solid. It's held in a freezer, sometimes for weeks, then finished in the store's oven and set out under a light. The industry's own answer to keeping bread fresh is the freezer. They just do it before you see it, and then they sell you the word fresh as though it meant today. That yellow sticker on the bag is worth a word, too. For a loaf of bread, that date is not a safety date, and it is not required by federal law the way people assume. It's a manufacturer's guess about peak quality. It's a suggestion, printed by the folks who benefit when you follow it. Now let me give you the limits because I said I would. A very crusty artisan loaf will lose a little of its snap in the freezer. The oven method brings back most of it, but I'll be honest that it is 90% of the way back, not all of it. Enriched breads, brioche and challah and anything with a lot of butter and egg freeze beautifully but dry out faster once revived, so eat those the same day. Gluten-free bread actually does better in the freezer than anywhere else because it stales even faster than wheat bread does. And if your freezer is frost-free, understand that it cycles warm on purpose to keep ice from building, and that cycling will dry out anything poorly wrapped. That's why I insist on 2 layers. 3 weeks is my own rule, not a hard wall. Quality holds well past a month. I just find that 3 weeks is the honest edge of tasting truly fresh. And here's the one that isn't about money. If you see mold on a soft loaf, throw the whole loaf away. Do not cut the spot off. Do not pick around it. Soft bread is porous, and the part you can see is the top of something whose roots have already run through slices you can't see. Hard cheese you can trim. Bread you cannot. That's a rule, not a preference, and no amount of thrift is worth it. Here's what I want you to do with the very next loaf that comes in your door. First, slice it if it isn't sliced. Second, Stack it back together with little squares of waxed paper between every 2 or 3 slices. Third, keep out 3 days' worth and wrap the rest in 2 layers, pressing the air out flat as you go. Fourth, pencil the date on the outside and put it in the freezer that same day, not tomorrow. Fifth, tomorrow morning, take 2 slices straight from frozen and put them right in the toaster and see for yourself. Sixth, this weekend, run the whole loaf back with a mug of water beside it in a 350-degree oven for 12 minutes and hand a warm piece to whoever's in the house. Then wait 3 weeks and look at your garbage can. There won't be bread in it. There won't be bread in it again. And that's the kind of thing my grandmother knew that nobody ever bothered to write down. If you want the rest of them, I've gathered every trick, every recipe, every method into one place. Save $4,000 a year with Betty Sechrist's complete home saving method. Just scan the code on your screen right now or tap the link down in the description and pinned right at the top of the comments. It's the same knowledge that kept families fed and warm when every penny counted, all in one spot. Go take a look. It's waiting for you. Look, here's what 50 years of standing at that counter has taught me. The bakery does not sell you bread. It sells you the clock. It sells you the idea that fresh is a thing that expires on its own, quietly, through no fault of anyone, and that the only cure is to come back on Friday and buy another one. Betty used to stand at her sink with her hands in the dishwater and say it plain, "Bread doesn't go bad, child, it goes forgotten." She fed a household through years when a loaf was a real decision, and she never once let one go hard in on her. So if this helped you, hit that like button, subscribe, because there's more where this came from, and drop me a comment and tell me 2 things: what kind of bread you buy and how much of a loaf you usually end up throwing out. I read every single one, and if your own mother or grandmother had a way of keeping bread that I didn't cover today, put it down there because that's how this works. We share what we know. Next time I'll show you how I keep a 5-pound bag of flour good for 2 full years without a single bug in it. Same idea, different shelf. Betty knew. Now you know too.